Hello, everyone. Hello, welcome to another episode of the recording. It is I, your Lord, your Master, your Savior. Oh my God, Videophile, and I am so excited to be here because I'm here with all of you, my lovelies, my people, my freaks, my rejects, my lords, my ladies, my wizards, losers, lizards is where I can't forget my demographic, and of course, my island boy, they're gonna go, oh my God, that is so hilarious, but I'm so happy. Why? Because I'm an island boy. Oh my God, no, but seriously, I am so happy to be here. I'm so elated. I'm sorry. Ecstatic, excited, elated. And overall, I'm concerned. Oh no, honestly, like the things that I have seen over the weekend. But, I'm sorry, I should probably start off with saying happy Thanksgiving to all of you. I'm so happy. During this time, we mostly call it the Kusala Sela. But, it is what it is. And what it is right now is a fiasco. My Thanksgiving was rather interesting. Things with friends, family, a couple co-workers, of course. And, and I suppose some hybrids, because honestly, since I'm going to be a teacher and a professor at the most prestigious college in all of Intisha. Well, you have to know at some point, yes, the place where I am from is called Intisha. You're welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is where I come from. But let me, sort of get these things out of the way first. I have to prepare myself properly, because if I don't have the right things, I feel a little bit naked. You see, oh, no. No, it's so bad, but no, I am so happy. I've been doing some experimenting. I've been crafting the arts. And I've sort of, started making jewelry, which I will probably share when I actually have it on me. I'm a busy man after all. And so, it's frankly something that I am actually very excited about. I always wanted to make runeware. Runes that you can wear in a fashionable sense. So I was like, you know what? Everything out there is so tacky, so old, so bland, and so normal. Everything is the bloody same out there in the mundane world. But of course, you can't help it because it's mundane. But I was like, you know what? Better yet, I am perhaps the best suited to make the proper type of attire for mages and for the mundane, as distinguished as myself, who appreciate the things of magic, of law, of learning, and of course, mana. And I am so happy because I have started something that I was only thinking about for such a long time. And so right now, I am in the process of bringing those sort of things together. I already have a pendant made, an amulet, as it were, with runes on it. It's supposed to work the same way, but it's a bit more rustic, but a bit more, nice and customizable, which is nice in its simplicity. Like the more complex it gets, the less customizable you can be with it. But it is what it is. But yes, so my Thanksgiving was rather fine. I have... Oh my God, I forgot about Maize Bakla. So yes, so Maize Bakla, it's actually a celebration that a couple of species from where I come from, they celebrate. Sort of similar to Thanksgiving, except, it sort of involves the darker elves in my realm. We call them dark elves because, for colloquial reasons. But they sort of live underground, like mostly in caves. And it's sort of a rite of passage before a large feast. They send forth envoys of, young coming of age elves, or whatever, and they go into the deep to hunt for mice. Bakla is pretty much the feast in their language, but mice is essentially what they have as a feast. The mice, it's actually a type of creature, a large creature. Some people call it the moth, or the mice. And the plural forms are pretty much a play on which we want to consider, but it's pretty much a large figure, rather hulking. It lives underground. It's sort of sensitive to light. But it's claimed the lives of many, young elves, both men, women, or whatever. And, so to start off the feast, they sort of go into the deeps, into the depths of the caves to retrieve this beast and to kill it and to bring it back, carve it open, and, and to pretty much eat it. They don't really let it go to waste. They're elves after all, but they rather enjoy it. I actually had the privilege and honor of attending one Maize Bakla. I believe it was maybe 50 years ago. It was very nice. It was some friends of mine, very close friends for the university, honestly, because that's how I met them to begin with. Exchange students, pretty much. They wanted to learn our ways, and I wanted to learn theirs. And so I sort of went to where they were. I went to the shrines, the altars, sort of participated in the events, their festivals, and of course their hunting grounds. And they have a very deep respect for people, especially of my kind, mages, people that can actually use magic but in a very effective way, specifically in combat, which is something that they respect very highly. You wouldn't expect it because, you have the idea of elves, whatever but they look very different from where I come from, and they sort of behave differently from where I come from as well. But I didn't want to go into the whole thing. I'm just telling you that, other people, other kinds of people have their own celebrations for this type of year. But my Thanksgiving was bland. It was bland. The beast itself, sort of seasoning, the things we have next to it, things like rice, because some people like rice. Everything else, everything was bland. It was a little boring. Honestly, Thanksgiving was a bit of a letdown, but I'm like, you know what? It's just the day at the end of the day. What matters is that you're there with family or with family. Oh my God, apparently the feast isn't over. No, but yes, so it was something, I try not to bring it up too much, Normally, they've usually been fine. But, they were using new things and instruments, that they acquired from the Academy as donations from patrons. They're like, look, we want to show you how much we honor you. We want to show you how much we care for you. So we're going to deliver you certain items and things that you can use for your feasts or for your experiments. And they decided to use it on the food we were going to eat, and it didn't turn out so well. But the dessert was fine, rather sweet, unfortunately. But it is what it is. The day is done. Now everyone in your world is going crazy for things like Black Friday. Right now they are crowding the streets and they are, eating children. Saying these things. I apologize. Edit, Philip. Sorry. Yes, but no. Today I want to talk about something specific that I believe will shape all of your minds around what you consider spirits and in terms energy. But it is quite fascinating. And the reason why the subject came to mind is because I listen to a lot of intellectuals speak about, what is the consciousness? How does something develop a purpose? What are things motivated by? Do things have a conscience, whether it's something that related to matter or not? Or things like calculations, things like philosophy, whatever. It's a very intriguing subject. And I was like, honestly, I feel as though perhaps the best thing to do at this time is to simply discuss, I believe, along the lines of where I think my sort of thing diverges. So in regards to things like spirits, this is, taking all the things aside. We talk about the science, we talk about the, physics, things that nature, even things like chemistry, biochemistry. And so we sort of relate all these things according to a certain law that we developed, that we've sort of observed and discovered, that sort of dictates how matter is supposed to behave, and that in turn, whatever is within matter is essentially what dictates its behaviors, or I believe its consciousness, or I believe its roles in life. However, I will say that there is something known as, I believe, the spirit is what we call it. Things like souls and whatever, which is a very highly debated topic in certain circles, especially in the scientific community. But I think the concept of the spirit or the concept of the soul is essentially the issue that I believe most people might find, a problem to, I believe, put together. So when you're talking about things like spirits and things what like what motivates a person, there is a mindset, an idea that the person in themselves has no, I guess, real reason, one, to exist, or two, sort of the motivations to do certain behaviors. They attribute it to things that are within their chemistry, that are within their minds. But I think that is perhaps a drastically oversimplification. And many people can't grasp the concept of a spirit or anything like a soul. You are what you are, and that is essentially what the soul of the spirit is. But I believe for those of you who perhaps aren't too aware of this, or perhaps want to, I believe, have a proper conversation to help someone understand this sort of thing, attribute the spirit or the soul as the body's inner energy. Compare yourself to a robot. A robot can't really do much. It's a shell in and of itself. But when you introduce electricity, the thing that sort of gives it life, as it were, that is what you would be calling the soul or the spirit. The spirit or the soul, two different things technically. The spirit is what essentially gives you life, the ability to do things or believe to, be aware to an extent. And the soul is your identity. These are two different things. Something can be alive but not have identity or believe self-awareness. That is where the debate with things like certain animals comes in. Certain animals aren't really aware. Certain animals just simply exist. They sort of go through life. They sort of live. But they don't, from our understanding, have a exceedingly large capacity to understand their role in the life that they lead and the sort of identity that they would then require in order to do certain things that they normally could not. That is essentially what sets us aside from the beasts, what sets us aside from the animals. Like, I can't say that. I'm going to stop saying that. I don't want to get canceled. But honestly, it's not going to happen. But when you sort of think about the animals in nature, they're beasts. They sort of just do. They eat, they consume, they shit, they live, they sleep, whatever. Rinse and repeat. You seldom find anything out there, aside from, certain exceptions within the animal kingdom, that demonstrate a sort of understanding or a sort of, enlightenment. I believe the spark that sort of alerts you that something is sort of thinking beyond its normal capacities. That is essentially what a human is, And the spirit or the soul is essentially the fuel, the electricity that powers that mechanism. A person, for example, who is bedridden or whatever, they're still breathing, they're still technically awake. As long as the soul is within the body, their consciousness is still intact. The consciousness and the soul are linked together. They're essentially the same thing. They're aware of who they are. They have the identity. And the spirit is essentially what keeps the body alive. However, it has been impaired in a way where the spirit cannot allow the body to move or function normally. That is where these sort of, exceptions sort of come into place. But when you think about, things like motivations or things like behaviors or even things like, attitudes and awareness and identity, these things all fall in line and are subjects, where I believe they are subdivisions and causalities from the results of having a spirit or a soul. Essentially the electricity within the mechanism, within the robot. A robot, an android, or whatever you call it, can only function if it has a power source. What is the power source within the human being? And even in the scientific sense, we understand that energy itself exists, and energy exists on a spectrum from positive to negative energy. The positive to negative energy can be measured through infrared scopes. It is something that is unseen by the human eye, but it is something that can be seen through a different perspective, through a different lens, a scope, as it were. And so this sort of heat transfer, we see it active in certain things that show they have energy. When you use infrared, when you use, the heat vision sort of things, what it allows you to see is energy. And energy is measured by heat. Sort of heat is, I believe, the essence of energy itself. And then you have things like cold or whatever. But cold, and in science would confirm this, is the absence of heat, or I believe the lessening of the heat itself. So the more cold an object is, the less energy it has, and the less presence of whatever energy is within it. And so within us, we can see this through the scope, that human beings, as well as animals, anything that moves in nature, has this type of energy within it, this type of heat. And if you can then identify and then show the heat as being the thing that causes the thing to move, that gives it the source, the ability to have action, to have, I believe, the wherewithal to move around, to be able, that you can attribute it to the spirit. The moment something demonstrates, I believe it knows more than it's able to, or I believe the thing is able to function on a different manner with the same amount of energy, you can then attribute it as to having a soul of some kind. Because the soul is the identity, and the spirit is the thing that gives the body the shell from which the soul inhabits the ability to move and to take action. And so because we have those sort of things within us, we have those type of energies, that essentially allows us to connect with other energies outside of our normal radius, outside of our normal space, our normal realm. Because other things that live in other places, in order for them to exist on a similar nature, they have to then have the energy of a similar kind and a similar nature. The sun itself, however bright it is, far away enough as it is, has an exuberable amount of energy. Now, some would say, well, if you're attributing to the soul of the spirit as being energy itself, then the sun, by your exact definition, would essentially be a giant mass of solar spirit energy. But that is not entirely true. You can have different types of the same thing. For example, you have something like bread, for example. Bread on its own, it comes from something like wheat. They have to mend the wheat, mold it, they have to sift it and everything else in order to make bread. But bread can then be used to, put the crispiness in chicken, the breading. The yeast within the bread can also be used for other purposes. And there's things like wheat bread, and you can even make it into fibers for things like that. So there are certain different iterations of a similar kind of matter you can have the same thing for energy, and the same thing can probably translate to spirit or the soul. Absolutely fascinating. So when you take this into account, you have to then realize that certain things, like living creatures, are all creatures that have this similar type of energy source, which is the spirit, which would be the electricity that powers, phones, robots, cars, anything that allows it to move, so sort of gives it the ability to act. The identity that the creature then possesses, that is not given to them, in a sense, is essentially the soul of that creature. And so I believe, from hearing the sort of explanation given by these philosophers, but there's certain people that sort of try to explain the purpose, not really purpose, I should rephrase that. They try to explain, I believe, the motivations in life and the need to do things are simply results from chemicals that simply appear within matter. And that unless if you have matter, you sort of can't do these things. However, as we've known, spirits and souls can operate and can still function outside matter. They are a different type. Energy can exist aside from matter, and they are not the same thing. Energy can manipulate matter, not the other way around. Matter cannot essentially manipulate energy exactly. It can sort of house energy, but it can't directly manipulate it. The energy itself has its own type of movement, it has its own identity. It can only be guided, which you would probably call as manipulation. But it's not like saying you can control, I believe, the essence of what the energy is. Like you can't really turn the energy on or off because the energy itself is eternal. Energy cannot be destroyed. Energy is something that always persists. So even if the energy is not present within that object, it is present somewhere else. The moment you turn off a light source, the energy comes back out and it goes into there, or it filters out into the atmosphere. Our souls and spirits work in the same manner. That is why when a person dies, they have no identity, they have no function. That is interpreted as the soul of the spirit leaving the body. And when that happens, the matter is still there, but the matter is not what dictated the person's personality or the reason for doing certain things. Surely the matter, in a sense, can sort of influence the energy itself, but it doesn't change what the energy is. The energy is simply what it is. It is simply heat or the soul of the spirit in these certain aspects. And so then we sort of go into the realms of, well, if you have these sort of things that can harbor, that can sort of harbor energy, and if we try to interpret the soul of the spirit as energy itself, then if there's no body, where does the soul of the spirit go? I believe when the body is no longer present. And then there are some beliefs that say that, well, the energy that is within the person or the person himself sort of go out of the body into perhaps the atmosphere to wherever. And so that is sort of a transfer of energy. So a person in and of themselves are essentially a hub of energy. You essentially have electricity within you, body electricity, like I guess like kinetic and like the nerves that shoot a freaking pulse of energy from one thing to the other to communicate. It is sort of reminiscent and if not identical to electricity in itself. And electricity is a form of energy. But electricity is essentially heat, but it's different types of heat, but it's still energy. And so when a person has a type of energy, this type of heat, it is then able to transfer to something else. So when a person dies or is no longer present in your life, that energy that's within the person that is perhaps the person themselves has to go somewhere. And so the energy will then go forth and it will go towards the different realms or dimensions that are able to harbor that type of energy. And so when it comes to things like the afterlife or whatever, you would then try to realize, well, then, what's all the talk of the afterlife? Heavens or hells or nirvanas, or you have valhallas or things of that nature. And what I would say is that, for example, if you were to attribute things to energy, as I do in regards to the soul of the spirit, the more positive a solar spirit is, the more positively charged the energy is. And it has to go to a place that is able to inhabit or that is able to, I believe, hold that positive charge. Negative energy, I believe, which is energy that has less of a positive charge, also has to go somewhere. And so the absence of that energy, the absence of what makes that positive, the energy has to go somewhere, but it is always positively charged. The negative energy has to then go somewhere else. There is a split division. So if I sort of identify ourselves as a type of energy, and if we take, science into account as to where energy goes, as to where energy is transferred, we can then also compare that to, well, the soul of the spirit, if we interpret that as energy as well, it would then have to be transferred to a place that is able to hold it, because energy cannot be destroyed. The soul and the spirit live on forever because it's essentially a type of energy. And it works on a similar nature, and I believe the laws of energy in and of itself. Energy cannot really be destroyed. It is simply transferred. It is moved from one object to another. It is moved from one realm to the other. And so when a person dies, their soul and spirit essentially traverse from their body into the next one, or perhaps into the next life that is able to hold it. And so then some would say that, well, for example, we have these certain beings, these sort of scientists themselves that you can call gods or whatever, that are able to sort of capture the energy itself and put it within a shell, or hold it within a large storage of some kind of energy. And you can sort of compare that to, the places like heaven, Valhalla, or anything else that sort of hold these souls, things like Mount Olympus or whatever it is. And the gods are essentially, the sciences are sort of, which are other types of energy, massive energy, master energy, that is then able to manipulate the other kinds of energy into another container, because energy attracts energy. Energy is trying to seek another source of energy where it can inhabit. It doesn't directly go into a vessel of any kind. The energy that calls forth that energy is able to then manipulate that energy and put it into a vessel in and of itself, a robot. An android or robot cannot self-manifest. It is not able to create itself in a sense. And it itself cannot, I believe, take the energy, or absorb the energy without being designed by something that understands how energy works. The shell itself does not know, but something that has consciousness, something that has awareness, does understand those things very well. And so it is able to understand itself, what is able to inhabit, what is able to absorb, and that is able to, I believe, consume energy, can then manipulate matter in a way that can then hold energy in itself. And so that is why I said before that matter cannot inherently manipulate energy. There is the idea, the illusion that it can, but the only reason why the energy is able to be transferred is because there's something attracting the energy to something else. So energy has to be used to manipulate energy through matter in order for the energy to move. The same way a robot works. In order for it to work or do whatever, it needs to have a source of energy. It cannot really do whatever. And as soon as the robot is drained or it has no electricity or any energy, it can't do anything. And the robot can't essentially absorb energy in itself. Energy has to be pushed. You sort of have to attract energy in a way that is then able to go into something. And I believe, if you take that into account, I believe in that case, you could say that perhaps matter can sort of, manipulate energy in of itself, but it does not dictate what the energy source is. The energy already exists. The type of energy is there and available. The only thing that's not available is essentially something for the energy to go into, something to hold it. So batteries are essentially, I don't think I have one on me at the moment, but batteries, you know what a battery is. I don't have to explain it to you. Batteries are essentially empty vessels at first. They are capable of storing energy. And think of energy as soul, so think of the battery as a person. In itself, the battery has the battery has potential. It has potential energy, and it has potential value. A battery is useless if it has no energy in it. That is why we throw them out when they run out, because what makes the battery valuable is not present. Which is why batteries that have a charge or that are able to recharge themselves are in more of a higher demand than batteries that cannot, because it essentially is something that is a lot more likely to attain and to retain the energy that we are requiring. We are creatures of energy that need energy for other things to function. Something that is not aware of the energy it possesses and that is not capable of, I believe, getting the energy in and of itself cannot manipulate the energy, because it does not have the energy to know the energy. It doesn't have the relationship. It is sort of the thing that sort of, the battery is like the clothes that we wear. They can harbor us, but we are the ones that sort of attract the matter to us. That is why you have suns, like they put off their own field of I believe, electromagnetic radiation, something of that nature. They have their own gravity. Earth is a similar nature, because you have this giant force of energy within it that's holding things in, that is attracting matter, that by some people believe that sort of formed the earth as it is. The energy within the earth was so potent, and it was attracting energy, and it was attracting everything, because that's what energy does. Energy attracts, and it also has a capability to dispel, because it has that ability, it has that function. Matter simply exists. It is simply there. But energy attracts the matter, and then the matter simply, goes around the energy. It tries to get close to the energy. Does matter itself have identity? We say no. But then you have different types of matter, things like dark matter or negative matter, whatever. Something I believe that's, mostly for a different video, different explanation. But when you think of the soul or the spirit and the motivations behind it, you can't simply limit it to matter and how matter functions. Because matter, we function because we have energy. We require energy to function. So by that, I believe, idea alone, we should surmise that energy is what is required in order for things to function, in order for things to behave, and in order for things to sort of have the awareness or the ability to do anything at all. So, I think that in regards to energy, I compare the soul and the spirit to energy, like how it is. The soul is what allows the energy itself to self-identify. It is what we have. You could technically say that the soul is a different type of energy that is introduced with that same energy. It's like having, it's like mixing sugar and water. Different types of matter, but when you put them together, it's a really nice thing to drink, and it is rather sweet, and it's sort of attractive to many different kinds of creatures, great, small. They all sort of like that sort of thing, But it's sort of in a nutshell. But I think when we're thinking about terms of energy, when we are thinking in terms of spirits or souls, I believe they are somewhat synonymous. They have to be around the same thing. So, we can sort of see how we behave, how we react to where we go based on what we see other things go. Right now, this candle, I'm going to be very careful with this. This candle right here is a real candle. It is fire. It has energy. It has potential. It has heat. It emits heat. And so the reason why it is valuable is because it has energy. It is able to provide light. It is able to provide warmth. That is where we get the value of a candle, as well as being very aesthetic. Very easy on the eyes. And your body responds positively to this type of heat or whatever. When the body is not equipped to handle the amount of heat, it rejects the heat. And the same thing can be done with things like matter. That is why something like us, we are aware of what we're able to handle because we have that energy within us and we are able to function because of that energy. If I blow this candle out, the energy starts to transfer, sort of like the smoke. The smoke is trying to go somewhere because the smoke's still harboring that same type of energy. And as soon as the things go out, the energy stops. It becomes useless. It is simply just matter. It has no real purpose. The potential that it has is gone for the moment. But unless it has something that is able to, I believe, capture or inhabit that energy, another type of energy, it's completely useless. You can't light a candle without a flame. So if flames never existed, if that energy was never available, whether it be, a candle, electricity, whatever that can cause a thing to like this to spark, if there's no energy of any kind, it will never light. It doesn't work that way. Like energy has to be able to give birth to energy. Energy has to be able to transfer to another source. To give something meaning, to give something purpose. That is where the spirits and the soul come in. And because we ourselves are hubs of energy, we ourselves have this type of spirit or soul. Because we have identity, we have the soul. And because we are alive, we have spirit. And our bodies, this shows, and as magnificent as they are the hubs that are able to harbor that type of energy and that type of power. And if you have energy, you have power. And if you have power, you have potential and you have pretty much anything you want. Power is what you need for, to do anything. It means you have the freedom to do things. Like it means that you have purpose in a certain way. You can create your own purpose with the power you possess. But honestly, I don't really want to go, too on about power. That's something else. I think I explained it in a different video. But if you liked it, if you enjoyed it, I surely hope that you could sort of, remember what I told you, sort of just think about it in mind, have a conversation, a casual one, with other members of perhaps your family, your servants even. And, if you are by yourself, I encourage all of you to, practicing whether it's sex or your craft. Like I said, I'm going to show you something magnificent and marvelous. If you're a musician, I sure hope you're practicing as well. With your tweelilies and your. Oh my! It still hates me. I hate you too, bastard. Whatever. It's gloves. I'm sorry. And and remember that I care for you. Pahalo cares for you. That you have family and friends here on this channel. Feel free to discuss what I talked about in your comments or whatever you like. And I really hope that, all of you come to understand that you are not alone, that because you have the energy, because you have the identity, you are essentially part of another greater type of energy and source. Even if you should perish, forbid the thought. your energy and your soul will go somewhere. And wherever you go, others will follow. So that is something to consider. I hope all of you are doing well. I hope all of you had a marvelous Thanksgiving, that you have a marvelous whatever comes before that. And that you remember that, on this channel, we seek to make the mundane magical. If you have your brother locked in a cage, let him out because it gets quite gassy in there. And remember, everyone, Amalu.